What up, though? It's Dwan Dandridge back with another episode of Speak for Yourself. Of course, we have Ken Elkins, our COO, in the building. And we also have a special guest, a good friend of mine, Chris Lambert. So, Chris, what we invite people to do here to kick it off is to introduce themselves, right? Like, you know, you get invited to speak at different spots and people may read your resume and all that, and sometimes they might introduce you in a way that feels comfortable for you, and sometimes you're like, I wouldn't have said that, or I would have said this instead. So to our listeners, to speak for yourself, how would you want them to be introduced to Chris Lambert?
All right, Chris Lambert. I am a follower of a Jewish construction worker who lived about 2,000 years ago, was brutally murdered, came back to life, and remodeled my life. I am a husband of what I would call an angelic wife, the father of two crazy, amazing sons, a proud Detroit resident, and the founder and CEO of Life Remodeled.
Cool. Founder and CEO of Life Remodeled. What is Life Remodeled, Chris?
So I always like to start off with why we exist before I talk about what we do or how we do it. And the reason we get out of bed 6 days a week to do the work that we do is because we're convinced Detroiters have all the talent they need, but many don't have access to all the opportunities they deserve. And so our response to that reality is to repurpose large vacant buildings in the city of Detroit into what we would call one-stop hubs of opportunity for families to thrive. And we fill these buildings with the best and brightest nonprofits who are moving the needle in three areas: jobs, youth programs, and health and human services. And then we help these organizations collaborate together to make far greater impact than they could alone.
Yeah.
You know a little bit about that, though.
I know a little bit about it. So I think that, you know, the assumption might be for some of us that don't know you, don't know the work that you do, or some that don't, I do, that you make it look easy, right? Because you've been able to accomplish a decent amount since Life Remodeled started, right? And if people aren't like close to the work and they may have tried some type of initiative themselves, they're really in tune and in touch with their struggles and how hard it can be. But when you see somebody doing something that's like on the scale that Life Remodeled is doing it, you might think that doors are opening like left and right, or it's really, really easy. What would you say to somebody that may believe that that's the case?
You know, one of the things that comes to my mind, first of all, is relationships are absolutely everything. And I think that's true in all sectors of life. It's absolutely true in the nonprofit sector. And I found that people give to people. So let me say, you or any of us could have the greatest idea in the world for a nonprofit, but if we don't establish significant relationships with people with financial means to be able to help bring that vision to life, that vision is likely to never get off the ground. On the other hand, if we make amazing relationships with people who have the means, but we don't deliver on the impact, on the work that we're claiming is going to produce all these great results, eventually that funding will run out. And so I'm a big believer that it's all about the alignment of the right cause, execution on that cause, and a relational network of individuals, foundations, corporations, whatever the funding sources may be, that there's a heart alignment with the people in that organization. And so I never intended on starting a nonprofit. But when I look at my trajectory of relationships, I was actually a pastor, and I'd spent a lot of time forming a lot of relationships with other churches, other pastors, with the intent that I was going to be a pastor for the rest of my life. And when I started Life Remodeled, because of that relational capital, a lot of these individuals ended up inviting me to come speak at their church. And because of speaking at their church, there were businessmen, businesswomen that heard what was being talked about. And Life Remodeled is not a religious organization, and it was really the first time many people had heard about something from the stage that they could get involved with their company being involved. So that played a pretty significant role in the early days of Life Remodeled. But continuing on to this day, I would say relationships still are everything. And it's not easy.
And so one of the resource centers, as you mentioned, that come out of Life Remodeled, of course, is the Durfee Innovation Center. So
Society.
I'm sorry, Durfee Innovation Society. Thank you. So talk to me a little bit about what exactly that building is and some of the success that has come from that space for the community.
Yeah, that building used to be Durfee Intermediate School, which was a middle school, and it's right next to Central High School. And then there used to be an elementary between the two buildings. Eventually, that elementary was knocked down because population decreased so much in the community. That Durfee building became a K through 8. Back in the day, Central High School had up to 4,000 high school students. They now have only about 250. Yeah. And so in the year 2017, the school district decided to move the 608 K through 8 students from Durfee over to Central High School, and they asked us to repurpose this building. And at first we said no, because at that time we were just investing in a neighborhood for only 1 year, and we were investing in existing high schools, investing about $5 million of labor, material, and in-kind donations in the building and the surrounding community. And we didn't have real estate experience, and we heard the building was kind of in shambles, and so we said we weren't interested. And a couple of weeks went by, we took a look, and obviously we eventually said yes, right? And we said yes because we realized that this project could make more impact than all of the work we'd ever done combined in our entire organization's history, and our previous work really wasn't sustainable enough. And so by establishing a sustainable ongoing presence that wasn't based on our organization alone, but it was based on a model of collaboration, we knew that together with the community and other organizations, we could help create the opportunities community members had been hoping for and looking for. And so when you think about how this school building was built and how most school buildings were built in America back in the early 1900s, they were built in the center of communities. They were walkable. And when a school building closes, in many ways, that can be a dagger to the heart of hope in an area that's experienced significant disinvestment. And school buildings don't close overnight, right? They're the result of decades of disinvestment. And so we took this real estate that became a painful disinvestment, and together with the community, brought together organizations that provide the opportunities they said that they wanted more of, right? So we went door to door, we went into the schools, we broke bread with leaders, and we asked them, what kinds of increased opportunities do you want more of? And there were 3 things that people said over and over and over, and Dwan actually did a lot of this work, so he would know, right? But more access to job opportunities, workforce development, health and human services, and youth programs. And so that's what it's home to, about 40 organizations who are doing just that, and it's actually had far greater impact than I even initially planned, and so I'm pretty pleased with it.
So I got a question for both of y'all, right? So as you talk about the relationship piece, and I'll confess that I thought that it was the thing that kind of kept us on the outside looking in as Black leaders in the nonprofit space or even for-profit space was, I thought it was pretty much just racism, right? Like, period. And while I still understand and realize that that's still alive and present in Detroit and other places, when you talk about building the relationships, right? So I think that sometimes Ken and listeners and Chris, that I think that I'm talking about Black leaders in spaces like Detroit, sometimes we're putting things in the box of racism or category of racism when it is lack of relationship, right? And I didn't know that until coming on this journey with Ken and other board members and some of the things I learned when I was at Life Remodeled about like establishing relationships. And one of the things I often say is like, you know, the things that I learned there while being on staff there was that, you know, it's relationships and being intentional. I think that we are pulled towards the mission, and we end up spending so much time and focus on the mission because oftentimes we're practitioners. Like, we really, really are close to the solution and the problem because we had to overcome it ourselves, right? So we understand that really well, and we end up diving in to that space. And I think that one of the things that I learned is that you have to be willing, able, and intentional about spending as much time developing and establishing those relationships if you want it to be sustainable, right? So, but even with that being the case, as I hear you say that, I think about, some of the challenges still that I know Black developers face, right? As I talk to some of the folks that read and whatnot, it still seems like the doors will still open up easier for you. And I know that Life Remodeled had a track record, right? What are your thoughts on that, Ken and Chris? The relationship versus like the presence of like racism and systemic injustices and whatnot.
I still view that there is some racism involved, as you mentioned earlier. I have learned through my time as well that it is relationship. A lot of it is relationship, right? A lot of it you can push past what may be perceived as racism, as you mentioned, just by building those relationships and intentionally building authentic relationships, which takes work. I mean, relationship isn't just an introduction. Hey, I'm Ken. Want to give us money?
Yeah,
right. That's
right.
That's
I
not
wish
a,
it worked like
right.
that.
It doesn't work like that, right?
Really
That's not a relationship. Relationship takes time. It could take a year or two of just building that before you even do an ask, right? Or doing an ask, but continually to build that if the ask doesn't go your way.
Yeah.
And so I definitely learned that in my time as an executive director. But also the saying, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know, is 100% true. Yeah. I do remember that people that I tried to get a meeting with when I was just Ken, that started a mentoring organization called Mentoring Through Media, was a lot different than when I joined Big Green, and Kimball Musk was the CEO of Big Green, and he made a phone call to someone. Now how quickly I was able to get that meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Initially, I did put that to race, was because it's a white man calling, but race wasn't the only part about that. It was his status, what he can bring. It's all these other things that also played a part into that, right? And so I think building that relationship part goes into showing what you as an individual can also bring to the table. And that's part of building the relationship. And should you have to prove that? No. But in some states, in some cases, it's worth showing what you bring to the table. I think that that's what you do extremely well.
Yes.
Is showing what you get when you invest in Black Leaders Detroit, right? You get to have a partnership with an authentic member of the city of Detroit, with someone who is genuine and with someone who has the trust of the people of the city of Detroit. And so I think all of that comes with it. So yes, building a relationship is a huge part of it. But again, maybe a small percentage does. Racism still does control a small percentage of that. Is my feeling.
You say small?
Small.
I mean, I absolutely am convinced systemic racism is alive and well. I think there's obviously different impacts throughout the last several hundred years of that, and that's created unequal footing and unequal opportunities, right, that persist to this day. And one of the things I know that's really important in developing a relationship with someone of great financial means is confidence. And that confidence not being arrogance, but yet a confidence of that I belong here, right? Which I got to tell you, I didn't grow up in a wealthy family. I grew up in a middle class area in a town so small we didn't have a four-way stoplight until I was in middle school, right? And so sometimes it can be intimidating hanging out with some older white men or older white women who are living way beyond anything I ever experienced growing up. But the other thing, you made a similar statement to this. I would say that's something we've all heard a million times. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Yeah. People who are considering or who might be candidates to give to your cause, they really want to feel that this relationship is real and authentic, and you can't fake it. And for people who have built very successful careers, one of the ways that they've done that is by being excellent judges of
sifting through BS.
What's BS, what's not, right? And so you got to really believe it. And one of the things that I'm very committed to is I genuinely love human beings. And of all colors, shapes, sizes. I mean, we talk about the privilege because of inequity of race, but there's gender, right? There's the religious privilege. Christianity is the majority religion in America, at least it has been for a long time, right? So I do carry around a lot of those privileges and work to steward them, and I absolutely believe those are real in many, many circumstances. I also believe that by entering into a discussion, not worrying about the lack of privilege that we may carry, that is really important to start that conversation off.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Unpack that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think that I go through my own insecurities, but I think my insecurities would be much more significant if I lived the life that either of you guys have lived as black men in America. I mean, based on what I know about you because of our relationship, especially you, Dwan. And I think that would, of all the messages that you've heard through media, through life experiences, that you can't do this and you can't do that, right? I think that would play a pretty big role in a person's psyche. And so there's no way I could understand how heavy that weight might be other than to say I got to believe it's heavy.
Yeah. And I would definitely add to that. You're right. I mean, you have to overcome that, right? And you have to self-talk yourself into overcoming that. And I remember as time went on, how much I had to do from my vocabulary to I've always been a charismatic person. So I knew you put me in a room, I'm going to be able to charm. Yeah, I'm going to be able to charm, my way into some things. So that's has never been an insecurity of mine. But some other things, and I remember
but not everybody has that gift, right?
Right. And again, you have to, like you say, even at some times, you still have the doubts, right? So I remember a couple years back, I was in it's interesting. I might have mentioned this before. I was in a dice game in Saginaw. I'm from Saginaw. I'm at a dice game in Saginaw. I'm thinking to myself, I don't belong here because this is where I'm from, but things have changed in my life. I have a family. The area, the people are around. Probably I shouldn't be there anymore. So I'm thinking I don't belong here. That's why I'm thinking that, because of my family and what I have to lose if something went wrong, right? That's the reason why. And then the very next day, I was in Aspen, Colorado, with a bunch of billionaires. And I'm thinking, I don't belong here. And so just two extreme dynamics. Yeah. And going through my mind, I don't belong here. And I remember at that point saying, wow, that's interesting. And saying to myself, no, I belong wherever my feet take me.
That's right.
It's probably a space I shouldn't be in, but I belong wherever my feet take me. When I go into any space that my feet take me, I'm definitely going to make sure they know I belong here, right? And so as you were saying, when you have that doubt, talking to yourself, letting yourself know that you belong in this space, you belong in this room, and more importantly, you have something to bring to this space.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the flip side. So thanks for sharing that, Ken. So did you go back to the dice game?
I haven't yet. I don't know if my wife's going to allow that to happen.
Right. The flip side to that, right? So we talk about, some of the, concerns, struggles, that doors that might open is faster for you than they would for me, Ken, some of the other folks that we noticed doing amazing work in and around Detroit. But what about community folk that are black Detroiters when they see white dude?
Oh, they say, man,
moving
finally, he
you know
came to the
Coming
neighborhood.
Is that what
we
they
love
say?
This guy.
Is
Hey, you
that
want to play
what they
dice?
say?
You want to?
Yeah.
I doubt that's
I
what
don't
they
think that's
say.
what they say. Things have changed.
I've never
Things
been
have
offered.
changed since I've left.
If that's what they say, things have changed since last year.
Yeah, but it takes the same thing, right? It takes somebody with the credibility of, what's the equivalent to the Musk folk to say, hey, you know what I mean? Like, listen to him. Yeah. He's with me.
No doubt.
Make that connection. And I would assume that even that, sometimes people are still looking at you sideways. You know what I mean? So how do you experience that when moving around Detroit? I know that it's important to you that you're able to connect with the folks that you're looking to engage with in the communities, when you're looking to get an invitation to work in communities, right? So what is that experience like for you?
Man, I've lived in or traveled to every continent in the world except for Antarctica, and lived in Africa 9 months, lived in Australia 6 months, and I used to think I really understood cultural divides and how to overcome them really well until I got really deep in Detroit, right? And then experienced an experience where my teeth were kicked in metaphorically, and it really was a shock, right, to me, and like, wow, why am I getting this reaction that I'm getting? And the fact that deeper I got in and really started to hear people say what they were thinking and feeling, the more scary it was for me of how deep this divide really is. And the first step, I think, to taking the right moves forward was empathy. Not that I can ever relate and be in someone's shoes who had the Black experience in America, but understanding the historical context of why they would feel that way, and even the reality that these factors are still perpetuated today in many scenarios. And so owning that as expected is something that's been important for me to walk into a space, because now I don't get caught off guard when I do experience it, right? And again, it goes back to that piece of what I said. A donor wants to know that you truly care about them as a person. The same exact scenario is true in Detroit neighborhoods. I mean, it's true anywhere in the world, right? I do believe the language of love crosses all barriers, but it takes time. The deeper the chasm is, right? And so,
and we're not quick to believe that a white dude cares about us. You know what I mean? Like so I imagine it takes a little bit longer, or maybe a lot longer, for you to convince somebody of that. Right.
I think it has taken me a lot longer than the scenarios that I've mentioned in the relationships with donors, right? Because I am a white man, a lot of wealthy individuals, CEOs of companies are white men, right? So there's that commonality of life experience. I don't have a lot of the same life experiences that you guys have had, or that a lot of people in the neighborhoods that we work in have had. And so even experientially, there's a divide, not even just the color of our skin, right? And so there's a lot of learning that I've engaged in through hard knocks, and you are the most effective bridge builder that I've ever connected with, and you played a massive role in that journey for me.
Thanks.
Now, so it still has to be tough, though, when you have a track record of doing what you say you're going to do.
It's hard.
And you have the visions of a project, like what was the recent high school? Cooley.
Yep.
Right? So you have the track record.
Yep.
Boom, look at me.
Yep.
Not look at me, look at us. Look what has happened. Like, no lie. This is transparent. This is what can happen. And then you have a vision for a school like Cooley, and then that falls, it fails because of that type of sentiment. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, that's tough.
Well, you just made it real practical, and I am still hurting from that experience. But what motivates me is the hurt that community members are going to experience for the lack of access to those opportunities is far greater than any of the pain that I'll experience. Some of my white suburban friends get really upset when these types of scenarios get to the public level, because they don't know what's going on a daily basis, that I experience a lot of friction weekly, right? It walking in my skin in a Detroit neighborhood. And when they hear about it, they're furious. Oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. I thought we were beyond this. And again, it goes back to, I get it. I get where people are coming from. I don't like it at all. But I'm a practical person. I want to live in reality. I want to face the brutal facts with relentless optimism. There is a lot of fear between black and white in America. A lot. On both sides, and on many sides, right? There's many variations of the black experience, the white experience, and so on and so forth. There's so much fear. And I enter into a lot of situations in Detroit neighborhoods knowing that that's there. And along with fear, hatred, right? But I also think that that's not the majority of my experience either. And so it goes back to what you said about there are bridge builders in the funding world. Wealthy people know wealthy people. They introduce you to their friends once they realize they can trust you and that you're not an opportunistic individual who's just trying to go after transactions, right? Mm-hmm. And you do what you say you're going to do, and so on and so forth. The same scenario happens in Detroit neighborhoods. So that was a huge L, what happened in Cooley. How much did race play a role in that? I don't know. I know it did, but it didn't. It is what it is. And I know this. I'm going to spend even more time developing relationships with influencers in Detroit who are black women and black men. And I'm going to do it, right? And it's worth it because the residents in the Detroit neighborhoods who aren't getting the access that they deserve, they don't deserve these political things to keep them from that. And so I'm going to do what I need to do, and we're going to do what we need to do to overcome silly situations like that.
I think about power dynamics, right? Like y'all both heard me talk about shared power. I think it was my second staff meeting when I was on staff at Life Remodeled. I said, that I said we as Christians, but I said especially white Christians,
Yes,
in the suburbs, don't mind sharing resources, but what you don't like to do is share power.
that was deep. I remember the day you said that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true.
I didn't know how long I'd be staying around after I said that, but it's what it is.
You have a way of, I say this to people that and I don't like quite how I say this. I got to think of a better way, but I say he has the ability to tell someone to go to hell in a way they could get excited about the journey.
You can say it like that.
Right? But look, he would never tell anybody to go to hell, right?
Right, no,
But
I wouldn't tell anybody
He
that.
can deliver those hard truths.
Yeah.
There's just something about how you do it that it makes it to where I can receive it right away.
Yeah, but it's the case, and so as I've seen kind of where even Life Remodeled was then, and even where you were then, right? Yeah. And some of the things I think that the kicking in of your teeth, some of those same people have embraced you, right? And like gave you dentures.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So.
So we got so those are dentures now.
We said
spiritually.
Oh, metaphorically.
Spiritually.
I missed the metaphor. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, all right, got it.
But they'd look a lot better if they were dentures, right?
But I think about, like some of the evolution, and I'm sure that there's still lots of room to learn and grow.
Yep.
But I look at the Life Remodel's board composition now. Like you have community members, right, that probably don't write. You're not looking for them to write big checks or make introductions to people that write big checks, but they're there and they have decision-making power on the board at Life Remodeled. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because all this stuff is nuanced, right? So I still am like extremely concerned with lots of the decisions at the highest level in the city as black as Detroit, the decision-making seats being held by white men. And like, I consider you an extremely good friend. Right?
Likewise.
But that's still a real concern of mine.
As it should be.
I mean, but at the same time, when I see some of the things that Life Remodeled has been able to accomplish, along with partnering, a real partnership with community members, like leading some of the way. When I walk through Durfee, I'm extremely proud to have played a part in what's happened there. Right?
Major.
Because I'm all about getting resources to folk that have been intentionally like left out of resources. I come from that space. So as nuanced as it is, can you talk a little bit about the importance of shared power and what does that mean to you and look like to the organization Life Remodeled?
Well, our staff right now, over 50% of our leaders are African American. 5 out of the 7 on our executive leadership team are black men and women, right? And one of the reasons I believe so strongly that in that is a spiritual reason. The other is experiential, right? So my spiritual reason would be I'm a follower of Jesus, I said earlier, right? And the God of the universe believed it was important to become a human being and to live a human life in a very poor context in an oppressed environment where the Israelites were oppressed by the Roman Empire, and a poor family. We know that by the offerings they presented at his birth. And to live completely under the radar for the first 30 years of his life and just have the human experience, to reach us, right? And that's what many would call incarnational ministry, for a theological term. And so I believe in it spiritually, that people looking like you to reach you has a major impact. Experientially, I've seen Black Detroiters, men and women, say something to a child or to another person that may literally be exactly the same words that I've used, and had far greater impact in what they said. Because the representation of someone I can relate to, that, right? It goes such a long way in the shared cultural context and the shared cultural competencies. And so there's so much to that practically and spiritually, that I am a major believer in Black leadership in the city of Detroit. And I'm a major believer in I think Mayor Duggan used this phrase, I do love it though, one city for all of us, right? Where I believe in all humans of all races, religions, socioeconomic backgrounds, loving one another, working together. This is a city that's over 75% Black. And so leadership should reflect the population.
Other thing that Life Remodeled does is also transform communities, or and clean up communities, right?
Right.
So I think that program has gotten a lot better since 2020. I think before that, it was kind of...
Why is that, kid?
That was when you was running. So before that, it was kind of crappy running. But since 2020, when Dwan left, it improved. But no, I know, I understand from him, of course, just how much work went into that program, how successful it was, and the amount of volunteers that's utilized to do it. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because it is pretty amazing, the work that Life Remodeled is doing.
Dwan is a visionary, but he ran an incredible program. All right, let me just set that record straight. The 6-day project was amazing under Dwan's leadership.
I think I volunteered once. It was all right.
Whatever.
But this city of Detroit at one point had 1.8 million people. So I've read, and now we're under 650,000. And so we all know the math on how much vacant land there is that is beyond what even the city can manage on its own, right? Or residents certainly shouldn't be expected to clean up blight on vacant properties. I know I wouldn't do it, right, on a regular basis. Maybe I'd get out there one Saturday a month or something. I mean, a year. But there needs to be an infusion of volunteers to assist with blight removal in the city of Detroit, and I think that'll be true for the next several years. I look forward to the day when that's not needed. I also want to acknowledge that grass is going to grow back, weeds are going to grow back, and so the work that we do isn't saving Detroit, right? It is a week of reprieve from blight. Blight is a major factor in criminal activity. There's a lot of social science to it. When a neighborhood feels like it's not being watched, it's not being necessarily physically as well kept as another neighborhood, crime is statistically likely to be higher in that neighborhood. And so reducing blight does reduce crime. Blight is a visual poison to a child or to anyone's psyche, right, to see that. And so our project, it does a lot, but it's only a week, right? And I do love what we do. I do believe in what we do. And the power of the relationships that form in the midst of that meaningful work, I believe, is the most powerful thing that's happening that week. And that's also why we ended up shifting to this model of opportunity hubs, where we were doing work that we knew would last because we were going to continue to ensure opportunities were accessible in this neighborhood for decades to come, beyond a 1-week blight removal and beautification project.
That's good.
So Opportunity Hub. So talk a little bit about
the Durfee Innovation Society, right? And
okay.
then we're in the process. I'll be able to announce very soon, God willing, the next school building that we'll be acquiring, and hopefully next month actually is my plan.
Look forward to it. We'll make sure that the listeners get some updates on that. We got a few minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about what you have in the works now. You recently released a book, and we talk about this here at Black Leaders Detroit often. Again, when my observation, oftentimes I see, Black nonprofit leaders in Detroit dive in head first with their experience, their own bank account, right? And we don't always have the infrastructure for the business side because the people that we're so close to the people that's extremely important. I see folks having crazy impact. They might not even be measuring their impact, but having crazy impact in their fields, but not able to really get scale what they're doing to kind of match their potential. So to hear about Next Level Nonprofit and people being able to have access to the infrastructure that may be missing to help them be able to scale it, that's really exciting to me. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what Next Level Nonprofit is and, again, the why?
Yeah. So, a nonprofit is an organization. By nature, an organization is to be organized. A business is an organization. I think in the nonprofit world, too often we separate ourselves from, businesses act like businesses and we act like nonprofits. And I don't even know what that means sometimes. A lot of what I've seen in the nonprofit sector is many nonprofits are led by people with incredibly passionate hearts and experience in social work, and a lot of individuals who haven't been in the for-profit world and experience some of the wonderful principles that are at work in some of the most successful companies in the world. And those same principles that are working in what we call the for-profit sector, many of those are absolutely essential to an organization being organized. And so I studied business at Indiana University. I thought I was going to go off and do business and law, and God had a different plan for me, but I never stopped feeding that appetite for business content. And over the last 20 years, I've read dozens and dozens and dozens of amazing, powerful books and realized how much this needed to be applied to the work of Life Remodeled. And so I started doing it. And one day I discovered a book called Traction, which became one of my favorite books ever, written by a guy named Gino Wickman, who's become a friend. And he created a system called EOS, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's not a software, but it's a way of doing business that simplifies the operations of an organization. And one of the things that I realized in that journey is there are some significant differeces between the for-profit and the nonprofit, so much so that a new system needed to be created specifically for nonprofits. And before our team at Life Remodeled created it, we tried to find one. We searched high and low all over the place. We couldn't find one, so we said, let's just create it, right? And so when you think about software for a minute, if you think about your iPhone or your Android or your Mac or your laptop, the most important software on any of those devices is the operating system. And the operating system integrates every complex program and makes complex things seem very simple. So simple that we take for granted those operating systems, right? And so an organization, everyone has an organizational operating system, not software. But what I mean by an operating system is we all have a way of doing things like ensuring we're recruiting and retaining and developing the top talent, that we have radical accountability throughout our organization, that we have the right people in the right seats, that we have a strategic plan that we're truly implementing with discipline. And I say all those things, those are the core pillars of these principles that are in this book that I've written. But we all have an operating system, whether we know it or not. And if we can't quickly describe it, then it probably was either created for us or created haphazardly. And we wanted to make something that's very simple to understand. But I would also compare it to like Alcohol Anonymous, the 12-step model. So a great quote in Alcoholics Anonymous is, the program works if you work it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing magical about the 12-step book sitting on your desk, or even if you read it. Yeah. It's only when you apply these principles. And so we've laid out a step-by-step guide of exactly how to apply them in a way that actually is going to create a far more enjoyable organization to be working in that will produce much greater results.
That's good. That's good. Got any more questions, Ken?
No, actually, I did see at the policy conference that the Durfee community.
That was big.
Yeah, did they rank number 2 and seen opportunities to thrive, right?
Yes.
So I thought that was pretty dope, especially with Durfee Innovation Society, more than likely being a part of that, a huge part of that. So I thought that was pretty dope. What do you think about that?
Man, that was incredible. So that research was done by Gallup, and they are doing this all over the country, and they interviewed 12,000 Detroiters all over the city, and it was measuring exactly what you just said, their perception of their ability to thrive in their neighborhood because of access to the opportunities they named were health and wellness, economic mobility, job training, educational attainment, justice for the police department's response, and community cohesion with others in the neighborhood. And so, look, I want to give first and foremost the credit to the community leaders who've been rolling up their sleeves and putting in work for decades and decades. And I want to say it's an honor and a privilege to be able to come alongside them and to help them bring their vision to life. And the whole reason the Durfee Innovation Society exists is to achieve those outcomes that study portrayed.
That's good. That's good. So congratulations on the success.
Thank you, man.
Hats off to you for enduring some of the things that don't appear to be success. And, you know, like I said to you.
And putting up with him. How long was he there?
Yeah, he said he didn't know.
How long was he there?
4 years, man.
He was there 4 years.
Our VP.
4 years.
And we found this in 2019, so it'd be like 4 years. Ooh.
He had a lot of work to do on me. It took him 4 years to get me somewhat where I am today.
No,
we
man.
both know he's a wonderful man.
We appreciate you coming out to hang out with us, man. And, looking forward to what the future brings.
I believe in this organization, and I want to personally ask anybody who knows me to contribute toward it. If you trust me that I know what I'm talking about great organizations doing great things, this organization is right at the top of my list. I'm a personal supporter, and I would ask all my friends and family to do the same if you feel so moved.
Appreciate that.